Videos you're about to see are a collection of videos that I've already done. Now, I've put these into categories. So in other words, out of the, at the moment, 900 odd videos I've done, I cover many different subjects from spirits, Bigfoots, aliens, ancient aliens, etc. So the video you're about to watch is a collection of just one subject. In other words, Anunnaki, pyramids, Egypt, whatever it is that you're just about to watch. Now, you can watch them all on YouTube free of charge, no problem at all. They're in sets of 5, as you see here, or they're actually in sets of 50, so you can actually watch them in one whole go, right from video number 1. But you can also go to my website and find the links and podcasts, etc. there. And the website address is ourtruehistory.co.uk, and you can again find the videos straight through there. And there's some special ones there which are also on YouTube. But if you're after something that's not on YouTube or on my website, I do have a Patreon page called Our True History, and it's at the moment it's got 76 other videos. Now, some of these are actually proper documentaries that I make. So there's a documentary called Everything You Need to Know About Spirits. There's a documentary called Everything You Need to Know About Mermaids. The spirit one is 3 hours long, fully edited properly, etc. So if you are interested in more of my kind of projects, or what do I call them, videos, feel free to go to my Patreon page. And also ones that are not categorized on YouTube, even though they're free on YouTube, but the ones that are not categorized, if you click here, you'll see category videos on my Patreon page, and it's got other ones, so it just calls part videos. So basically it's the same as what you're watching now, but may not be on YouTube. I've put the category ones on Patreon, but again, you can watch them all in order on YouTube or my website free of charge. But Patreon, unfortunately, you have to pay. But that's why I sit and make very long documentaries about everything you need to know, etc. So hopefully I'll see you there. Anyway, enough of me waffling. Enjoy this whatever it is you're watching, because I'm using the same intro for all the videos. Thank you. Is there a God? And what's it got to do with this little fella, the Star Wars character? Well, we all heard of the white man up in heaven, and if you actually just replace the word heaven with space in the Bible, go back and reread it, it totally changes the whole book. But Anunnakis did have the white beard and looked like the god that's depicted here. So you could be mistaken thinking, well, that is the god that everyone sort of knows. But when you asked an alien, so abductees and contactees have asked various different aliens when they've been in contact with them, is there a god? Their answer is that there is either, depending on who you ask, creation or the source. Now, it makes it feel like that is some sort of living something or other, because otherwise they would have just said, no, there's no god. So the little greys were around after the Homo sapiens were created, and I think that's because the creatures before the Cro-Magnons and Neanderthals, etc., I don't believe they had the pineal gland, but I think after we were created, we did, and that's what the souls enter, and that's what brought the greys and their masters. And I'll talk about greys later on. There's a whole different story with them, but there's proof that their kind of craft were around throughout the centuries, right up till now, obviously. So these old old paintings have, as you can see, UFOs in the backgrounds. Even craft that's got people inside them. There's a really good one there with a light beam come down. Obviously, when I get to Jesus, I'll explain about lights and how they lift people up and cattle mutilations, etc. But there's another one there that's actually having an effect on this bird. So they've been around for. So while the greys were here during the time of the Anunnaki, the greys were picking up people and doing modifications to them. Genetic ones, and that lineage. So, for example, your great blah 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 grandfather may have been selected by a grey to do an experiment on, and each generation they come back and they manipulate or check on that person. So there's a long bloodline. So if you feel like you've been abducted, chances are your parent or both parents or whatever have been, and then their parents and their parents' parents. So this started way back when the Anunnaki were here, because they do experiment with people for lots of different reasons, which I'll go into when we get to the actual greys down the line. Let me tell you a story about aliens and Bigfoot. So this gentleman here is called Robert Hall, and during the war he was a little child and he used to play on the street with other friends. They saw a UFO land, a disc-shaped one, and it cloaks itself. Out comes little greys and a Bigfoot. We know that Bigfoot, from what I've mentioned in the previous video, do travel the stars. I mean, George Lucas was already pretty much gave everyone it on a plate with Chewbacca, but not many people seem to understand that him and Spielberg are very, very, very clued up on this. Anyway, so he saw this Bigfoot with the thing, with the little greys. Now, Richard D. Hall that's the guy at the top there, if you can see, does a website called richplanet.net, and it's got an interview with he's Gary Heseltine. He's a ex-policeman who interviews people as well. But there's Robert Hall, who was interviewed by Richard D. Hall on richplanet.net, and he explains the whole procedure of what actually happened. In fact, even to the point of where a policeman got involved, and because the little grey was chasing him as a child, a policeman stepped in, whacked the little grey so hard that it actually killed it, and they had to put it in a basement until the very next day, when more different police turned up to take the body away. Fascinating story. Now this is where you may have heard the word little green men. Now this guy's accent in the UK is very, very strong. I think he's in a place called Gateshead, and so when he says the word little grey men, he actually comes out little green men. And the news reporters that came along to his house, when they found out what happened, wrote down little green men. So that's, that establishes why, because the greys are not green. So but after that, the men in black also showed up at his house. So I would suggest strongly, it's called the Gateshead Grey. Look it up on YouTube or richplanet.net. Watch his story. I found it compelling, and I totally believe, certainly the why would he talk about Bigfoot and little greys? There's so many other cases with Bigfoot and the little greys working together, coming out of their ships, etc. So go and watch it, and then come back and carry on watching mine. Thanks. Sleep paralysis. That's when a doctor tells you that you didn't really see these little grey aliens in your room, and they didn't really paralyse you. So they say it's sleep paralysis when you're in fear. Now, that's all fine, but they use that as an excuse, because Betty and Barney Hill in the 60s were the first people to actually describe a little alien grey, and their description was really only localised in the local paper. So people all around the world at that time were started to say, well, I've seen these little grey aliens. But now people say that those people had seen stuff in the TV and the movies, but back then there wasn't nothing to see these type of creatures. It wasn't really till 1987 that they became sort of mainstream with books like Communion. So the sleep paralysis works nowadays. Yes, you can use that because we've all seen what these look like, but back then, 60s and 70s, they were hardly described, but yet people did actually encounter these beings. Let me tell you a story, and this is a good one. So people have been abducted by aliens, and this is to do with crop circles actually, so bear with me. And while they've been abducted throughout their lives, they've been forced to learn this code, these symbols. Now these ones here are just representations of what people remember seeing on what they call an I-beam that was part of the crashed Roswell ship. So these are just from what people remember they look like off of some part of the ship. But anyway, going back to these people, so these abductees are sitting on this chair in a ship looking at a screen, and the symbols next to them would have A, that would have B, for example. I'm using this as an example, and C, and so on. And over the amount of time they've been abducted, they had to keep learning all the symbols, what these symbols mean. Anyway, one day one of the, many years later, and he's now an adult, turned around to the aliens because he's now a contactee as opposed to an abductee, and I'll explain the difference in another video. He turned around to him and said, look, why are you teaching me your there's symbols and that? It's a load of rubbish. And then they showed him for about 4 or 5 seconds a few different symbols, and bang, he had read a whole book in those 3 or 4 or 5 seconds. So the speed of what you can see on symbols is quicker than us reading left to right. So what I'm saying is a crop circle, although we're just looking at it as symbols, it's probably telling a whole story about what the planet's up to, in other words, the state of our Earth around the world, which is why they're all different in different locations. So I'll just give you an example of why symbols can be better than reading left to right. So look at this. This is a way that we now could learn to read. So you get the point. So symbols could be the way of the future. So let me show you something else. Crop circles. Apparently, if you spin them, this is something I'd heard years ago. If you spin a true crop circle, you will see something miraculously happen, like a 3D image or something like that. I'll let you go and try that. This is a poor quality video, and I'm not sure if it's a true crop circle, so you have to do it with the true ones. So that's interesting. And one last thing. It's said that if you print out a copy or even have an image on your phone of a true crop circle, it will bring you good luck. I haven't actually tried it. I know, as stupid as it sounds, I should really print one out and just keep it in my wallet. But the people that have said that good fortunes come to them. So thank me and send me money if you come to it. Foo Fighters is a name that was given to UFOs back in the 40s. Now, it wasn't until 1945 that UFOs became really, really popular and seen a lot more. And that was because the first nuclear bomb that was exploded. Now, it's said that the nuclear bomb had tore a rip in the interdimensional space-time and allowed UFOs to come through. That's why we could see them. And the other version of that is the fact that we're now had the capability of destroying souls, as I mentioned before, and the aliens didn't want us doing that, so that's why they became a lot more interested in us. Kenneth Arnold was a pilot. He drew this, and he said he saw multiple of them in 1947. So as time moved on, the aliens got far more interested in us than what they had before, but I'll tell you more in the next video. Sometime during the Second World War, Nazis were in communication with the reptilian race. And the reptilian race you don't really want to deal with. They're probably the nastiest ones out there that I'm aware of. Now, if you remember I said about the Council of Aliens that put Earth on quarantine, that basically means that these reptilians can't come down and start giving us weapons, etc. So what they done was they pointed the Nazis, knowing that there was a war going on, they helped them find these underground bases, massive bases, in Antarctica. Now, these underground bases apparently are millions of years old by another alien race that was here at the time. So the Nazis obviously started to use that. Now, apparently, Hitler himself escaped to Antarctica in a submarine. Lots of submarines were going backwards and forwards. But the US had a trick up its sleeve. So while the Nazis were getting help from the Reptilians, President Eisenhower was approached by, and I believe it was either the Palladians or the Nordics. They set up a rendezvous in an air base and basically said to Eisenhower, listen, we'll enlighten your species so you can all evolve. The only thing you have to do is stop the nuclear weapons and make sure the whole planet stops. Eisenhower thought about it and said, well, there's nothing in it for us, pretty much, words to that effect. Go away. Some few weeks after, another race that was waiting came down, and this is obviously a fake picture, and had another chat with Eisenhower. And this time Eisenhower agreed to the terms and conditions of their treaty that they suggested. and I'll tell you the ins and outs on the next video. The treaty between Eisenhower and the Tall Whites, that's who I think they were. I'll talk about alien races later on. The treaty goes something like this. Eisenhower or America would be given technology that will help clean up water, clean up our oceans. Nothing that would, no nuclear type weapons or anything like that. But a lot of technology that would help them. And of course, Eisenhower thought, oh, this could help, beat Russians, beat anyone. So in return, though, the aliens are allowed to abduct people, experiment on them, wipe their memory and put them back. And Eisenhower agreed to that as long as the aliens gave him the information on who was abducted. And that's where you get the Men in Black, which I'll talk about later on. So Eisenhower agreed to that, and that's why we're abducted. So Eisenhower had this now task force, which we call now the secret military complex, but back then it was just a handful of people with this technology that the aliens were giving them. Move on to move on to President Truman, and he set up a thing called the MJ-12, which is basically called Majestic 12, and it's 12 people that would deal with all of this alien business, so they would report to him and he would know what's going on. Now, the reason why the Men in Black were involved is because the aliens didn't actually give all the correct information on who they were abducted. They were supposed to be telling them who they abducted and did operations on and put back, but they didn't. So when abductees started to talk, word got around and the Men in Black would show up and want to know. Now, these were men from the secret military complex, wanted to know what was going on because obviously they were being lied to by the aliens. So they wanted to know as much information as they could. Now, there's another type of Men in Black, which I'll get to in a sec, but I've sold out at the moment. Sorry, don't hate me, but I bought a product on eBay in the UK, and I think it's only for the UK. It's a fridge door alarm, and they offered me 50 quid, and I thought, just to sort of give them a shout out, I use the product. It sends a beep if you leave it open too long, and I have thrown food away before because I didn't. And they've got a website called fridgedooralarm.com. Sorry, that's that. Back with Men in Black. So the second type of Men in Black is a different alien race. Now, people have called them shapeshifters. Now, these are another alien race that want to know what's going on as well. So they will also turn up, sometimes after or before the American Men in Black turn up. Now, the shapeshifters have been said to look identical to each other, and they have no eyebrows, and they look like they've got a wig on. So there's two lots of Men in Black, so that's why there's a lot of muddied water. People are a bit unsure, are they American or are they alien? The other lot are aliens, and they're trying to find out what the other aliens are doing, abducting people, because sometimes when people get abducted they can recall things and give information to the Men in Black, and then obviously the Men in Black say, you never saw this, you never was abducted, say nothing. And both lots of aliens, both lots of Men in Black say that to the abductees. And yes, they do have a device that can actually make you lose your short-term memory, which is why they show that in the movies. If you don't believe me, 7 or 8 years ago they did it with mice, apparently, just normal scientists using a light, and it would make it forget its short-term memory. Before I talk about all the different alien races, it's really important to know that presidents, some of them were in the know. Reagan was pretty much, I think, one of the last ones to actually get the full briefing on it. And there was actually a transcript of a briefing from 1984, I believe. And the transcript's online. I'll put a link into for you guys to find it. But basically, he's been told for the first time about EBEs, which is extraterrestrial biological entities, and who's good, who's bad. They can only talk about so much because at that point, 1984, they didn't want to talk about too much because he needed to have more and more briefings to go along with this. But this is one briefing. Now, I've studied this. I'm quite prepared to say I believe it. It ticks all the correct boxes, or if it's a fake, someone's really, really clever and knows everything about everything. President Reagan actually wanted to get the information out there, so people know of the speech that he did in front of pretty much the whole world, well, I'll play it for you, but then I'll tell you some information you may not know.
Perhaps we need some outside universal threat to make us recognize this common bound. I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
Okay, so you heard there it talks about aliens. Now what you might not know is he wrote that in his script. His press officer removed it. He wrote it back in his script. Press officer removed it. And then when he came to do that speech, he did it ad lib because he wanted us to all know. And that's why we ended up with the Star Wars project as well. So he was trying to help us. The Zeta Reticuli aliens come from a binary star system, and they actually inhabit 2 planets. These are the good guys. These are the ones that crashed in New Mexico, Roswell, back in 1947. Now, Betty and Barney Hill was abducted by them, and when she asked where they're from, they gave her a holographic image in front of her, which she recalled under hypnosis and drew this, which wasn't till, I think, 20 or 30 or even 40 years later that someone worked out that it's the location is Zeta Reticuli star system. And that's because back then when she first drew it, we didn't even know of Zeta Reticuli. So as I say, these are the ones that was from the crash. Now one of them survived apparently and was called J-Rod. Now J-Rod helped the Americans communicate with their his home planet. Here we go then, the alien races that you've all been waiting for and bugging me for. Okay, we'll start with the Zeta Reticulis. We call them that because their star system is called Zeta Reticuli, and I'll get to how we know that in a second. So they're a binary star system that they're in, which means 2 suns. They actually occupy 2 planets. Now they were the ones that crashed in the flying saucer in Roswell, New Mexico. Now this here is from the Smithsonian magazine. Online, if you can see at the top, and yes, we know they're talking about that it was really a weather balloon. It wasn't. One of the aliens survived, and he was called J-Rod, and he was picked up by the army. But prior to that, I just must say, a lot of people say that it was shot down by the army, the craft. Now the problem with that is it was a couple of weeks before a rancher found it. Now, if you're shooting down a UFO, you kind of know where it's going to land. Do you know what I mean? You don't leave it 2 weeks and then have a rancher find it. The army's got bloody planes and all sorts of stuff. No, it was brought down because there was really, really bad weather, lightning and everything around that area. I can't believe that the army would shoot down a UFO and leave it. No, that's just ridiculous. Okay, so J-Rod was picked up by the army and was taken to a secret base, and he spoke in clicks and things like that, which made it really difficult. But over a long period of time, he helped them translate things into his language, and he helped create a device to be able to talk back to his home. Now, Betty and Barney Hill, I've mentioned before, Betty asked where these aliens were from to one of the aliens, and he gave her some holographic image that she then later drew under hypnosis. And it wasn't until many, many years later, because no one could figure out where that was, that I believe a teacher worked out that it was, because by then we found out where Zeta Reticuli was. Back when Betty and Barney, there was no Zeta Reticuli, our telescopes weren't good enough. So it was worked out that that's exactly where they come from. And as shown here, there's various different images. You can have a look online and explain how it all worked. Now, they're the ones that also left this message here, which was the reply to the Arecibo. And if you've watched the other videos, you know what I'm talking about. And they actually say in that message about their 2 suns, etc., and the fact they're on 2 planets. Now, Close Encounters of the Third Kind actually based their film off of these Zeta Reticulis. I'm running out of time, so you'll have to bear with me and watch the second one. Hope you're enjoying this so far. So Spielberg knew all about the Project Serpo, which is basically the J-Rod that I mentioned in the last video. He helped the army, or the secret military complex, whatever you want to call it, to organise a exchange of personnel. Now Spielberg put this in his film. So a ship came from Zeta Reticuli. The actual planet we call Serpo. So this actual event was called Project Serpo. You can look it up online. And I think 12 of our people went in their ship, and we had a couple of theirs exchanged. And the 12 people went off to their ship, to their planet, and stayed there for I think about 13 years. Some died, some wanted to stay there. I'll have to cover that in another video. But Spielberg and Lucas are fully aware of everything. In fact, I believe that Spielberg actually pays to have people's implants that's taken out of them. But don't forget to look at our other videos. They're not all about aliens. They're about... Okay, if you watched the last video, you'll know where ET come from. Any guesses? J-Rod, yes. So basically, Spielberg was fully aware that the Roswell crash left an alien here, and the alien was the one called J-Rod. Now, if you look here, he's got the long, slender fingers and the big eyes. Obviously, Spielberg couldn't recreate exactly the same alien as he did in Close Encounters. So E.T. is J-Rod, now, which is a Zeta Reticuli alien. Now, they are nice, they're friendly. They actually telepathically help people while they sleep, to tell them, warn them about what's going on, and look after the planet, that kind of thing. Now, that's where it starts getting messy, because there's other alien greys. So those were biological entities, proper real aliens, whereas some of the other greys are actually created and implanted with AI. So they're not actually they're like androids basically, but with real bodies, but with computer stuff mixed in. It's quite complicated, but so lots of races actually use these, and they hybrid them. Now I've only recently found out that apparently America, the secret military complex, have now got their own, creating their own of these small alien greys. So that really confuses things when you now get abducted. Are you actually now getting abducted by the little greys from aliens, or is it now the Americans doing it? But anyway, now these guys are the ones that pick you up and take you to their ship. Now there's so many stories. They're not exactly the smartest robots, androids, aliens, whatever you want to call them, on the block. Now they can sometimes return you back in the wrong place. They'll return you in your car, and the car's facing the wrong way because they can lift the whole car up in the beam. They put your shoes on back to front. They put your clothes back to front. So that's why you hear all these stories about these abductees that end up with missing time, but their clothes is round and back to front and things like that. It's these little guys. Now these generally come from the tall whites. Now the tall whites are the ones that oversee the operations that you would have if you was being abducted. That's not to say they're the only ones. There's reports that possibly the Nordics are also standing around watching what's going on. So the reason why they abduct people generally is to do with DNA. We've got nothing else on this planet really that we can offer. So although saying that, there is trades goes on, which I'll have to cover in another video because I'm running out of time. The Reptilians, so there's a few different thoughts on this. So the first one is that these type here, the Dracos, the ones with the horns and the capes, are the kings or the leaders of the other ones that are not. So different types of Dracos there. Not sure about them, haven't really come across many of the hybrid little reptilians, and I don't think they would, to be honest, want their blood mixed, so I'm not sure on hybrid reptilians, but certainly the Draco. So strong, powerful, can be up to 9 foot tall, lizard type skin. If you remember the old TV show called V, yeah, they pretty much got it right. They have now. There's reports that they may kidnap people and use them as slaves. Now the military have been known, or secret military complex should I say, have been known to give a certain alien race, now they didn't say which one, but I'm probably guessing it's probably these guys, humanoid or humans' clothes, food and things like that. So in other words, they're giving them stuff that slaves would need. I'll go on to slaves later on, because there's a whole another thing on slaves, but but there's also the theory that this type, or very similar to this type, was living underground after the dinosaurs were slowly phased out. Because if you watch the other videos, they didn't die out 65 million years ago, they carried on living. And underground were these characters. So technically they say that it's their planet and not ours, but I haven't heard too much of those ones underground, so just hold that with a bit of skepticism that they're actually here and living underground. So the Dracos, or the reptilian race, now these are the ones that I said were really bad. We don't want to meet them in a dark alley. Now there is a book, well, I mean there's loads of books, but I'm just using this one as an example. So I've mentioned before that the New World Order, the 13 families all answer to one above them. So in other words, the 13 families on Earth answer to an alien race. Now I believe it's the Reptilians, so that's whoever wrote this book. So it's worth looking into. Actually, while speaking of books, I did get an email, very lovely email from the author of this book. Obviously he saw my video and said thank you very much, so it was really nice. Thank you back to the author of that book. You're very welcome. The Sphere Being Alliance. Now this guy here, Corey Good, has supposedly worked for the secret space program on other planets, and came across the Blue Avians, which is that, and the Sphere Being Alliance, which is the spheres. And I'm not going to say anything. You go listen to him. He's on radio shows. He's even got this program here. My thoughts are, there's not many other people talking about these Sphere Being Alliance and the Blue Avians. He seems to be one of the only few that do. So it's hard to get true info, because obviously if you're only getting it from sort of one or two sources, then it's very difficult to collaborate. But apparently they're a good race, or both of those are good races, and if they are real, they're here to help. Yeah, she's screaming because there's a giant praying mantis. Now there is a giant praying mantis alien that's been reported many times, and they're normally working with the tall whites, and as I mentioned before, the tall whites work with the little robot-y type, android type little greys. Now these praying mantis are one of the oldest types out there, one of the first sentient alien races. They're very kind, believe it or not. They do have souls. There's reports of people that's been under hypnotists and have said that they recall being a praying mantis and actually doing all that kind of stuff. So praying mantises are very intelligent and probably running the show with the tall whites. The constellation of Orion is where the tall whites come from, and the small little greys. Now there might be a interdimensional portal there which allows other bipedal, humanoidish looking characters to come through, such as 2 arms, 2 legs. Now the tall whites, it's a tricky one because they are really looking after themselves. They abduct people because they are creating a hybrid society. Now whether or not that's to replace us when we're no longer here on Earth, I don't know, but basically there's so many cases of people being abducted and then impregnated and then going not to full term, but then suddenly waking up one morning the baby's completely gone and doctors are baffled, etc. And that's a hybrid, and sometimes the abductees are allowed to see the hybrids in another visit. The Nazis actually won the war. with the help of the Reptilians in the Antarctic base, which I've mentioned before. Now I'm talking about the Reptilians here because Admiral Byrd went to Antarctica with a massive fleet of planes, ships, tanks and everything. There's even a video footage of certain bits of it. This is called Project High Jump. Now there was something going on in Antarctica, so he went there and they came across flying UFOs that apparently destroyed half their fleet or something like that. And Byrd went up in his own plane, Admiral Byrd, and was tractor beamed inside Antarctica. There was an opening and he was pulled in, and aliens there, which were pretty much with the Nazis, turned around and said, tell your president that, you know, we will be able to attack you if you cause any problems. So the Americans a couple of years later had to make a treaty with the Nazis, and that's still going. The Nazis actually built bases on the moon prior to the Americans getting there, from what I understand. And the Americans had to pretty much agree with the treaty that I mentioned in the last video in order to actually join them on the moon. So now that you've got the Americans and the Nazis on the moon, but the Nazis do run a lot of the show there, which is why I say they pretty much won the war. Now you've got Nazi scientists that came over, von Braun from Germany, and started NASA. So the Nazi influence there, that was called Operation Paperclip, when they brought over a lot of the people that was against America. They actually allowed them in and got them working for them, but in the end it kind of feels like the Nazis won the war compared to America. Do you want to see a UFO over Los Angeles? Well, there was one, and although a film was made called Battle LA, that film was sort of embellished and had big special effects and everything else. But what actually happened with the real version was back in 1942, a UFO was flying slowly over the ocean towards Los Angeles. And obviously back then the Americans were petrified of the Germans and even the Russians. So they put their searchlights on it as it got towards Los Angeles and fired and fired and fired so many rounds of ammunition at this object, which you can see there. It didn't destroy it, didn't do anything to it, and I will explain another time why no weapons can destroy it. Eventually this thing just flew off, but people's the shrapnel came down and actually hit people's cars where it wasn't hitting this UFO, so you can actually see the UFO there. UFO crash, but wait, you've probably heard of Roswell, but there's probably more to it than that. So some people are saying that the military brought down the ship. Now this isn't it. This is just a fake version of it, because the debris field for the real one was over a mile long. It was smashed into a billion pieces. But they're saying that the military's used this special microwave weapon to bring it down. Now I have a problem with that. See, I don't believe everything. I have a problem with that because it was over a week, I think, before someone actually found this craft, and it was a rancher. It wasn't the military. You'd think the military would have, with this special technology that they've got to bring down these things, would go and straight away and pick up these things, but they didn't. It was a rancher, and then the military actually admitted it was a UFO, and then later they retracted it and said it was a weather balloon. And yes, we all know about the weather balloon. Let's just look at what the Smithsonian says. Where does it say there? A high altitude balloon. The mainstream lie, and so does the military. So the Roswell crash, I believe that the UFO was brought down because of the lightning that happened on that night. There was a massive thunderstorm around that area. I don't think the military brought it down, otherwise they would have went looking for it. And there were so many eyewitnesses. So even Jesse Marcel, after the rancher contacted the military, Jesse Marcel, which was an intelligence officer, he came along, looked at the debris, looked at the dead bodies, little 4 foot or 3.5 foot aliens, and contacted the local doctors and asked for coffins for children. Marcel also took some of the material home and showed his child this special metal that would unfold back to exactly how it was. But unfortunately, the military then retracted their statement that it was UFO and was told to say it was a weather balloon. UFO crashes in Roswell, there was actually more than you think. There's about 7 between 1945 and 1948. Now crashes do happen all over the world, and I will do some videos on some of the other ones. But the Americans now actually can bring down UFOs, but obviously they've got alliances with certain types of aliens. So you'll see some footage later on where I'll show a laser beam being shot up into space and a UFO, managing to escape being hit. Now, New Mexico, or Roswell, is quite an interesting place because that is where Dulce, the base, is a secret hidden military base. So that area, New Mexico, is quite important to the aliens for whatever reason. Now, the UFO crash that Bob Lazar worked on could have been one of these 7 ships. Yes, that is the inside of a UFO, and thanks to this guy, Bob Lazar, he gave us the information. So back in the 80s, he was just a very clever guy, didn't work for the military or anything like that, but he knew about propulsion and jet engines and things like that. The military, secret military, needed his help because they couldn't figure out how the propulsion on this worked. So they interviewed him and blah, 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 and eventually he got a job at Area 51. And he worked on the propulsion system, and that's where he told us that there was a thing that powered that called element 115. Now, back then in 85, there was no such thing as element 115, but later on we have managed to synthesize it. So that's what the craft uses, but I'll go into more details on crafts later on. So while working at Area 51, that's where, back engineering the craft, that's where we got fiber optics, because that come from the crafts, and lasers. This is the inside of a UFO as reported by Bob Lazar. It's made for the little 3 to 4 foot grey aliens, and it's powered by element 115. We don't have element 115 here on Earth. We can now synthetically make it, but it's nowhere near as good as the true element 115. And when the Americans want to fly their own UFOs, yes, they did have their own UFOs, they have to actually do deals with the aliens to get element 115, which they do, and I'll talk about deals later on, how the Americans do deals with different races. So inside it, it's all made of one material. So for example, if we 3D printed this UFO, there would be no nuts or bolts, no seams, and that's exactly how this was described as being built. It's got 2 levels. One is the power part there, and then there was 3 seats at the top with no buttons whatsoever. To the silly people that's going to tell me that that's not a real German UFO, no, it's not. It's just a picture. Stop trying to nitpick. It's really hard to get a German, or photographs of the things that I'm talking about. That's the whole reason why I'm talking about it. If it was in mainstream and everything else, then you wouldn't be listening to me. Okay, so Germany did have crashed UFOs, and they did back engineer them. The Reptilians weren't allowed to help give them weapons, so obviously they couldn't weaponize these back engineered UFOs. I believe the one that was that flew over Los Angeles was a Nazi one, and they was doing that to prove to America that they had air superiority. Now someone said, why couldn't we drop a bomb? Well, it's because there's a force field, well, not really a force field, a energy field around the ship, which has a gap, and if you try and drop a bomb, it will just literally still be in that gap, and it will just follow the ship around. Same reason why we couldn't shoot the one down in Los Angeles, because there's this gravitational distortion field there. So this is an American UFO. It's called the TR3B. It's used primarily to take people to the moon. You may have seen these type of craft flying around. People's got lots of videos of it. They take this to the moon. They've put presidents and world leaders in it and have taken them to the moon, which I'll cover in another video. So if you see a triangular ship, it's probably, with the 3 lights at the bottom, it's probably the American TR3B. Now, while I've got you, I have to say a couple of things. First of all, I do the shorter videos, which is why I'm always rushing. And the reason why I'm doing the shorter videos is because the algorithms, the longer ones, the 3-minute ones, like the one I'm doing now, hardly gets watched, because obviously non-followers won't watch the whole video, and it only gets shown really to non-followers at the beginning, so they just switch off. And second of all, I'm gonna have to ask your forgiveness, but I'm gonna start blocking silly people that ask silly questions. because I like to debate, and I want you guys to see that I'm not frightened, and I won't shy away from questions. But some of these people are just so thick, these trolls, and they really are trolls. You know, you look at their account and you just think, my God. And now you know why the depopulation's happening. But anyway, that's just another matter. So, for example, there was one guy that said this was proven to be done by humans. So, of course, then I asked him, okay, show me the proof. I know there isn't any, you know, the guy obviously hasn't researched. So I said, once you've got the proof, let me know. But when you haven't, because there isn't, come back and say sorry. Obviously, he didn't. Then you've got another guy on another video that said all crop circles are man-made. And, of course, you know, if you've watched the other videos, you know that that's not true. So I said, show me the proof that they're all man-made. So he sent me a link to Doug and Dave. Yes, we all know Doug and Dave. So then I wrote back saying, because he was calling me names, he was calling me dummy. So I obviously replied back saying, look, you know, watch video number whatever it was, and it proves it, and now come back and say sorry. Obviously he's totally run away now. But the point what I'm trying to get at is I'm going to be blocking these people now, but I didn't want my followers to think that I'm deliberately blocking people because I'm frightened to answer their questions. I'm not. I'll answer sensible questions from sensible people. But when people start writing BS and, you know, you're a dummy and things like that, it's just not worth my time going through. I'd rather answer your proper questions. So please forgive me if you start seeing me delete and block people, because it's not me, it's them being thick and not researching and not wanting to learn. And I'll leave it here. Thank you. Well, thanks for watching. Okay, who is this guy? Anyone recognise him? Is he the guy that created time travel, UFO, and teleportation? Yes, his name is Hitler, and he did. So during the war, he created this thing called the Glock. I'm going to show you how it's spelt, because I don't know if I'm saying it right. Now, this was had anti-gravity and had the possibility to teleport. Turns out it may have actually had time travel capabilities, which they didn't know at the time. And it was being tested here in Poland, and it was chained to this this structure here, as it was, you know, as they kept testing it. This was a secret base, military base, Nazi base that they had there. And one day it disappeared, and that's the end of that. But 1965 in Kecksburg in America, eyewitnesses say that they saw this ship come crashing down into their forest. UFOs actually stop nuclear weapons while actually in flight, as well as turning them off in bunkers, in the secret bunkers that they have. And one secret bunker was in England, in a place called Rendlesham Forest. Military had bases there, but what they didn't tell the English people is, and they weren't allowed to, because they had nukes there and they shouldn't have had nukes. And so I'm just showing you here more. There's so many cases of Air Force people saying nukes have been disarmed. But in Rendlesham Forest, eyewitnesses saw this particular ship trying to fly over where the nuclear weapons were, which was the naughty of the Americans at the time for having them there. The eyewitnesses saw this craft land, and a couple of them, the army officers, one of them touched the actual craft and got a message from the aliens, and I'll read that out next. The UFO at Rendlesham did come about 4 times, I believe. On the 4th time it landed, aliens got out, had a chat with high-ranking officials, because by the 4th time high-ranking officials found out about it. This was over Christmas period, so they all turned up. But a couple of days before, when there wasn't so many people knowing what was going on, the craft landed, and there was a couple of officers that attended, you know, to find out what's going on. One of them touched it, said that he had missing time. Now, the missing time makes sense because he was within that warp bubble that the ship generates. But he also said that he was downloaded, given this binary code information that he didn't really know at the time. It wasn't until at night he would sit and write it out in his notepad, and he kept his notepad. And I'll tell you in the next video what the binary code message from this ship actually said. So this is what the officer's notes on the binary code that was downloaded to him from the UFO. And he wrote these over a series of nights, I believe, and he just kept writing them into his diary. every time he remembered them, or it didn't even remember them. It was just like it was downloaded into him, and then he just physically just kept writing these zeros and ones. Now I have a problem with that, and I've spoke to Linda Moulton Howe about this as well. And my problem is the translation of that reads this: exploration of humanity. And then it just sort of gives coordinates, and it's nothing really important except it says at the bottom there, or year of origin 8100. Now, the amount of pages he would have had to write binary code. Now, let me just show you here. This is me typing in our true history. Wow, look at all the amount of zeros and ones. And I'll explain why I struggle with the binary code in the next video. Okay, my problem with the UFO binary code that was given to the officer is, look, 3 words there, and look how much that means if you're doing it in binary code, because binary code is zeros and ones. So this guy wrote pages and pages and pages and pages. Now, if it's an alien race, why are they, this is my problem, why are they using English language? Because it's translated back into our language. Why don't they just use our language? Because you have to know our language in order to do binary code. So it's just I just can't get my head around that. And 3, if they're from the future, because apparently some people say, oh well, that ship was from the future. You telling me that the best they can come up with is ones and zeros? Because someone has to decipher that. Unless you've got an IQ, way more than mine, that can decipher on the spot binary code, then it was pointless doing binary code. I mentioned before about the sphere being an alliance. Now if you have a look here, there's a round object. Now that object is the size of a planet right near the sun, and it sucks energy from the sun, and this lasted I think 3 or 4 days it was filmed. Just taking the energy from it. Now I don't know if this is part of the sphere being alliance. Look, and eventually it goes away. This is just showing you in different colours and different spectrums to show you it. But when it's finished, it actually leaves the sun. So I was just trying to show here that not all UFOs are saucer shaped or triangular. This one, look at that. I mean, that's amazing. So this one's the size of a planet. So bear that in mind when I talk later on about other spaceships. That's massive. During a Concorde test flight, an orb flew around it, so it went behind it there, you can see, and now it goes in front of it. Now this is not going at Concorde, supersonic speeds, but still, this orb is actually catching up with it and flying with it, and then flying off once it realised it wasn't a threat or whatever it was. So that was really interesting. Also, I'm just going to give a shout out here to Reptilian Hunter Official. He's got very similar sort of videos to the ones I'm now showing about the UFOs, etc. Not so much the history like mine, but fascinating videos that he's got. So Reptilian Hunter Official, just giving him a shout out. An ancient alien device or satellite left in our orbit. Yes, there's a thing called the Black Knight satellite that's apparently millions of years old, that's been left just outside our atmosphere there. And what makes this interesting, although it's possibly millions of years old, left by an ancient race, is its orbit is a polar orbit from which goes around the North and South Pole, as opposed to left to right or randomly round. Now, to get the pole to pole, because of the magnetics, etc., etc., it would need to have been put on that trajectory and sort of almost keeps that trajectory instead of veering off over millions of years. Now apparently the actual Black Knight satellite lets off some sort of radio broadcast. Now Nikola Tesla said he'd received such broadcasts. Now it could have been a letter there, which could mean the Black Knight satellite he received information from. You wanted aliens? You also want to know who the whistleblowers are. Well, Dr. Stephen Greer set up a disclosure project in the early 2000s where a panel of people that actually have seen aliens or have dealt with the corruptness of the establishments hiding the aliens and alien artifacts, etc. Now this panel of people stood in front of a Senate, a committee, and under oath gave their testimonials and brought along evidence. Now here's just a tiny snippet. If you can read the top bit there, the guy.
But it would probably take a whole lot of time. The reason I state that, when I got out in 1989, we had cataloged 57 different species.
So there's army people and there's all sorts of people. You can watch this video online. So it was Dr. Stephen Greer, The Disclosure Project. Fascinating. You should really watch it if you want to know what people saw. I mentioned before that the Rockefellers don't really want people to know anything. However, Lawrence Rockefeller does, and he's tried to help Clinton, President Clinton. He's tried to help Stephen Greer with the Disclosure Project by funding these things. He does actually want the world to know about aliens. Now, who else wants people to know? Well, a guy called Tom DeLonge. He used to be in Blink 182 as a singer, and now he's set up a thing called the To the Stars Academy of Arts and Sciences, and he's managed to get a few notable people in the government to help him with ways of trying to disclose the information to the public. So I'm talking about disclosure here. And someone else you may not realise is well into this is the singer Robbie Williams. Now, he is absolutely fascinated by this subject and follows it vehemently. He even went to Skinwalker Ranch, and I'll do a video on Skinwalker Ranch because that's a fascinating place. Alien abduction. Now, they sometimes pick you up in a beam. Now, this beam can actually penetrate through walls and ceilings and doors. But sometimes they also walk you out through a wall, for example. I'll cover that in another video. But the beams are really interesting. So literally a split second before you are beamed up, what happens is you hear this crackling sound, like a kind of static sound, and then your body is yanked up. Now, they can actually suck you up really quick, and it's not actually sucked up. The light, it's like a laser which can attract to your body heat, so it yanks you straight up. They can do it slowly as well. But while you're in that beam going up, you become unconscious, or most people become unconscious. But if you're not unconscious when you get to the top, they make you unconscious. The next video is a fantastic story. You have to listen to it. Let me tell you an absolute fascinating true story. So there's a guy in his mid-40s, lived in rural America, and he was very, very agile, fit and everything else. He went to bed one night. Next morning, he didn't wake up. Colleagues at work got worried. The next day, he still didn't turn up after that. Finally, they went round his house and they saw him still in the bed, facing upwards. Bruises on his face, and there were some marks on the ceiling, actually. He didn't know what had happened and why he was paralysed. They took him to hospital, etc., etc. And then they had to hypnotise him to try and figure out what the hell went on. Turns out, an alien beam caught him, but his head was just outside the beam. So as the beam sucked him through the ceiling, his head kept whacking the ceiling and broke his neck. Aliens abduct women, sometimes for the purpose of putting a baby inside the woman's womb. They impregnate her using tools, and not physically, so to speak. And so there was one particular case. There was a lesbian couple. The woman had never ever been with a man, and she was abducted, implanted, went to the doctors. I think she was about 3 months. The doctor said, yeah, you've got a baby, blah blah blah, it's a miracle birth. And she's going, no, it was aliens, I remember. Anyway, a couple of weeks later, the aliens came back, beamed her up, took the baby out of her, dropped her back into her bed, and lo and behold, the doctors couldn't work out where it had gone. But that is atypical of the hybrid program that they do. There's thousands and thousands of women that have gone through this where they were pregnant and the next minute they're not. My UFO encounter, if you're interested, I was on top of a hotel in Tenerife. It had a swimming pool so you could lay there. I was with someone, and out of nowhere, sky was totally clear blue. I was looking up, and out of nowhere, this black object came out and went like this, and had to turn. And about this point, I mentioned to the person I was with that, hey, what's that? That person said, my God, what is it? And we watched it fly off towards Mount Teide, which is a volcano. About 5 minutes later, a black helicopter came flying towards the same direction that went. So it came out of a portal by the looks of it, and obviously because it had to turn, portals don't exactly go where you want. You sort of, looks like they're restricted to where the portals go. UFOs have been reported over volcanoes all the time, and yes, there's something to do with the radiation or something like that that they're interested in, because UFOs were seen over Fukushima after it had had the accident, and actually the radiation went. This is a little doozy, you may have heard of this one before. So basically a UFO apparently crashed into a windmill, an old windmill, back in around the 1897 mark, and it crashed, and the town folk there were horrified to see these little grey aliens dead. So they didn't know what to do, so they actually buried them in an undisclosed location. However, and that's the headpiece, however, they've since been moved or stolen by the government. Why would they take them away if they're not really real? But hey, you guess where I'm going with that. Now, the people that was there where the ship crashed owned the land, and what they'd done was they took the pieces of the smashed UFO and threw them down the well, and that well then became contaminated with some sort of radiation, and now people could never drink from it. A very interesting story about a UFO crash in New Mexico, but not the Roswell one. This was a different one back in 1948, a year after apparently, although there's some debate whether it was before or after. But a couple of people was out in the area. It was sort of desert area. They saw a crashed UFO. They contacted the police contacted the army turned up, told the people that they never saw anything. One of the people that was there, I believe, from what I read, you have to ignore this for a minute, they said that they looked inside and saw body parts, human body parts, as well as little greys, and so did one of the army people that actually was there. But now you've got these things here which saying it's a hoax, saying that someone or a couple of people were trying to pretend that they've got alien tech to sell on. But let's be honest, 1948, there's no internet. Roswell was supposedly a weather balloon, so who's going to even want to buy anything off of them? Because this is just this. There are creatures that live in space that don't need ships or helmets or anything like that, and these creatures are like microscopic creatures here on Earth, but these are massive, 3 miles long at least. So NASA was doing an experiment with a tether, and the tether snapped, and the tether is 12 miles long, and that's the tether there, the long thing. Now just watch these creatures come out of nowhere, and the camera was recording was an infrared camera. The astronauts at the time couldn't see these, only the NASA Control Center could see from the video feed, and they asked the astronauts, what do you see? And they just said, well, we see the tether. So it's only on the infrared spectrum that you can see these. Now these things are at least 3 miles long, some of those, or 3 miles round, should I say, because the tether is 12 miles long. NASA admits portals. Now a portal is somewhere that bypasses the middle bit, so in other words you can travel from A to B but without going through A and all the way to B. NASA calls them X points, and they've noticed a few of them around Earth outside our atmosphere, and they open 2 or 3 times a day. And so if you've got a telescope, you'll be able to see, if you're lucky, you keep the telescope going and record it, you'll be able to see UFOs coming and going through these portals. Obviously NASA won't say there's UFOs using them, but they are. Now that's the natural type, they stay in pretty much one place, whereas you've got the other types of portals. One type is a machine, a UFO physical machine that generates a portal in front of it, and then there's another alien type of craft that's kind of like a mixture between a living organism and a spacecraft, and that opens portals. You may remember the alien autopsy footage. I'll talk about that later on, and that's supposedly with a Zeta Reticuli grey from the Roswell crash. There is a film called Alien Autopsy starring Anton Deck. I actually really liked that film, so if you want to watch something a bit fun, it's really good, that's my opinion. And if you do see a UFO, there's a place called MUFON. You can contact them online and you submit your details about what UFO you saw, even if you see an alien. It's a non-profit organisation, and although Robert Bigelow, you may remember me mentioning him in another video, he actually, I think, bought into MUFON to be able to get as much information as he could out of it. But they collate your information, and they have sort of databases of where craft were seen and things like that. And so it actually shows a pattern. For example, UFOs fly a certain path around the world as opposed to going left to right. What's your IQ compared to an alien? Well, this is supposed to be a tall white, but I don't think it is. It's more like a Palladian to me, but I'm just using this for reference. So the tall whites can speak every language that was ever written, and that's a hell of a lot. There's a lot of languages that's come and gone that you don't even realise. Now, something also that I find quite fun is abductees have said that they've been taught to fly ships, not by the tall whites, but by other alien races such as Palladians and the Zetas. And now they've been taught to fly ships, and the reason why they said is because when the time comes, people will follow a human into the ship to help get away from whatever the problem is that we're going to have here, compared to them being led by aliens into a ship. So make of that as you will. A little bit about the Zeta Greys. They wear a one-piece skin-tight suit that is almost indestructible. Military struggle to get that off of them when they've obviously come across dead ones. The Zetas also don't understand us because they can actually watch our TV. They have actually the ability to watch TV. I know it sounds stupid, but they do. And they to one abductee that they said to him, why does... Obviously, they were looking at the police at the time. Why do these people kill or try and kill someone and then run over and heal them? They couldn't grasp that. I guess because no other animal does that. You know, they're not going to try and kill someone and then run over and help them, but they couldn't grasp that. Also, their jobs, when they're born, they're allowed to do any job they want to. There is no money situation. They don't worry about greed or anything. And everyone has everything they ever need, so they're not going to steal off of someone because they get given the same. You're probably wondering why the Zetas abduct people. If the Orion Greys abduct people and they're bad, then surely the Zetas are bad if they're abducting people. Let me just give you an example. So they abduct people, and they have done this en masse. Actually, they've got people to a certain place in a field, and then the ships come over and beamed everyone up at night into the ship, and then they're led down this corridor into a massive room. And they're sat down in front of these screens, and the screens. So these people are sort of, they're conscious, but obviously under the control of the aliens, and they're shown pretty pictures of Earth from way back, you know, when dinosaurs are here, lovely blue oceans, etc. And they progressively show videos of the planet getting worse up until the future, where the oceans are basically destroyed and brown, and they're trying to say to us, look after the planet. Whitley Strieber was just a normal guy that was abducted many a times by aliens, and is still abducted, I think. And he wrote a book called Communion. If you haven't already heard of it, which I'm sure you have, it's worth a read. Now, in this book, he, for example, explains how they walked him out through the front room wall, through glass and everything, and he knows in the next morning he knew what had happened, because when he went downstairs he could see in the front room mud and flowers from where he walked back through the wall when they returned him back. But he also had an implant inside his, I think it was his neck, and at around that time there was a guy called Dr. Roger Lear, professional doctor, who was finding out that inside patients there were these weird devices that he didn't understand, and I'll go into alien implants in the next video. But so Dr. Roger Lear then became fascinated while he was just doing normal surgeries for people, and they would come across people with these implants, and sometimes he would notice them in the nose and things like that, and he eventually found out that they actually let off some sort of RF frequency, if I remember correctly, or UHF frequency, which made him more and more interested. So he then devoted more and more time to actually only doing surgery on people with implants, to actually take the implants out. And one of the people was Whitley Strieber, who I mentioned in the last video. Now, when he went to take the implant out, and there was a camera crew there, if I remember correctly, the actual implant moved just as he put the scalpel near the guy's, I think it was neck, near Whitley's neck, it moved away. So this implant knew that it was going to be taken out. I'll cover more about the implants on the next video. The most common place an alien implant was put originally was inside your nose, up in your nose cavity. But a lot of people would have nosebleeds and the actual implant would come out, and sometimes people would see it in the tissue and say, what's that black thing in there? And they just thought it was a bit of metal from, I don't know, somewhere else. But what aliens then ended up doing, they moved them to different places. But one of the things they've done is they scoop out a bit of your flesh, and then they wrap the implant inside this flesh, and then they put the flesh back inside you with the implant inside that, and that stops the implant being rejected as a foreign object by your body. So abductees have these sort of scoop marks, and that's another way you can prove that they was definitely abducted. But now they put the right behind your eye, the implant, they push it up right into your brain so we can't. So some alien implants actually grow fibers that attach to your inside of wherever it is inside your body. Now it's believed that they actually deliberately do that. It's not just like your skin wrapping around it or your fibers wrapping around it. This looks like it's actually designed to have fibers come out and attach themselves to you. So the question then is, what is the purpose of these things if they have some sort of frequency? Now, one contactee had turned around to was told by an alien that the alien said that they could find a fly anywhere on the planet Earth. Now, they didn't say whether they could find a fly using a implant. So the question is that to help track the people as well as vital statistics? I would probably say yes, it is. It's probably there to monitor people. Grey aliens take our souls. They do. There's been many reports from hypnotists that have hypnotized an abductee, and the abductees have seen a person, for example, lying in a ship on a sort of bed type thing, and a tube above this person, and this person's dying, and the light from the soul from the top of his head, which makes sense because that's where I believe the soul or the light being comes from, goes up into this tube as this person's dying, and the abductee watched this light go all the way around into a container, a large container that had a clone of the person that was just dying. So they call us containers. That's why they don't look at us as important. Many more cases of aliens having thousands and thousands of these lights, which is our spirit. This is a dead alien woman on a spaceship on Mars. So the story goes, NASA, one of NASA's Apollo missions, had an extra person or an extra couple of people that went up with the normal crew. When they arrived on the moon, these other people went to this ship that looked like the Umi ship, which passed us recently, but the one on the moon is just obviously stationary. It's been derelict. Other aliens had apparently got in and ransacked it. All that was left is pretty much this woman that was perfectly preserved type of thing, but she was half android, they said. Anyway, they took her back to the ship and brought her back home, apparently. So have a look at that. But also on that same mission, I think it was, one of the astronauts took a picture of an alien that came up to him, and the alien said, "You shouldn't be here." And there's a picture online, but I can't find it. This isn't the real one, but if you find it, let me know. UFOs are invisible. They're invisible to the naked eye. A lot of them anyway. So when you see footage that's grainy and blurry or even green like this, it's because they're used with night vision cameras or infrared cameras. There's just a video here showing that people couldn't see the actual triangular object with their naked eye, but they did with the night vision. Now you need a certain type of night vision goggles. You can't just get the oldest type. You have to have the very latest versions, because they certain optics only work to be able to see these craft. But I have to just say this video is sponsored by FridgeDoorAlarm.com. frigidooralarm.com, and they offer a product that you stick to your fridge and you have different time delays. You can get it from frigidooralarm.com, or you can get it from eBay. This is only for the UK. So there's the one there. If you look for the pictures there, be careful, because there's other ones out there that are literally just a door alarm. They just go off as soon as you open the door, and they're trying to pretend they're fridge freezer things. But these ones are actually real ones, and you can set how long you want the actual delay for, and then it only goes quiet and then gets louder and louder, whereas other ones just ones. So yeah, just go for the ones that these pictures here. So going back to the optics now, military grade ones are the best, obviously, but they come at a hefty price. 16,000, I think I looked at one. So if you get in, do some research if you are interested in looking into the sky. Now, a lot of videos I've seen on YouTube have been pulled off. I've seen literally almost what looks like space battles that people's filmed using their binoculars or their telescopes. But you can't, you can't find those now hardly on YouTube, and you'll probably know some of the people that were putting these videos online. And there's one guy that literally films the moon all day long and all night. He's been pulled off now because obviously there were so many objects that he would capture. So a lot of the videos are getting pulled off. So if you want to, see a UFO, unfortunately, you will really need to have night vision goggles that can see at night. I hope you're enjoying this video so far. I have actually put the remaining videos of this category that you're watching on my Patreon page. I'm sorry to do that, but again, they are free already on YouTube. You just have to watch them in order to find the ones you want. But whatever it is that you're watching at the moment, the remaining, well, the whole video is on my Patreon page, so feel free to go there and watch the remaining, however long, it could be another hour's worth of footage, videos, etc. So I'm just trying to do it because having a website costs, and I have to pay every month for the server space. So I thought I'd do, so I hope you know where I'm going with this. So hopefully you like it. If you do, go over to my Patreon page and watch loads more videos, loads more content, as well as the remaining however long, and it's going to be long. I wouldn't do it for just 1 minute. So there's loads more to watch on my Patreon page. Anyway, thank you so much for watching these videos. And as I say, they're all free on YouTube, but you just kind of need to watch them in an order if you do want to watch them in a category. Thanks. Bye.